right, guys, so this is the first walker, okay? And I'm this walker has various materials. I'm not showing exactly how I made everything, but I will show how I make the legs because legs are crucial. And then just some of the stuff that I put. Obviously, these are metallic lids, right? From bottles. I'm going to be drilling holes in there for the weapons. But now I'm going to be doing a cockpit in the interior because this is an open top walker. Okay. And I just found the perfect piece. So I'm very excited about it. Perfect piece for the cockpit. Okay. Once the cockpit is done, I may actually paint it first, and then that's a good rule of thumb whenever assembling, models that have cockpits like that. But there is that metallic bar that's going to form the cockpit. And sometimes with scratch builds, that's why it's cool to collect different things, because you never know what you're going to get, right? You have to really play with all the shapes. Okay, so tools are a very important part of any serious scratch builder. Most experienced scratch builders are going to show you what tools they use in their channels, and this is very important. So the more and more I learn about these builds, I begin to find ways of using my tools in different ways. One thing that's becoming more and more important is my Dremel. This was a great investment. I paid something like $65 for it at Walmart about 6 years ago. So it's 6 years old. And I have to tell you that it's just a great tool. I'm beginning to use it more and more in these scratch building projects for shaping things. Literally, you can use it for sculpting. I have some special bits that I bought, again, some time ago, and I use those bits very carefully to get certain shapes while sculpting. Well, I have figured out a way to actually use those bits on plastic, okay? And they work well. Yeah, I may have to replace them, but they're really not that expensive. So I would use them on a new kind of work that is coming to the channel, all right? And I don't want to say too much about that now. This is not the video for it, but keep in mind that it is coming. So Dremel tool, highly recommend it. Very important are my pliers, and I have many different sizes. This one's a little plier that I bought, oh God, I don't even remember. It's been with me forever. And it has other little bits on it. It's really like a Swiss Army knife kind of thing. This is crucial. So having very small pliers and having tweezers are two things that are very important. You can find tweezers anywhere. They're inexpensive tools. And then larger pliers are sometimes necessary. And sometimes I will work with two pliers in order to shape things, especially when holding things over a fire, like my forge candle, and I want to kind of bend that plastic slightly. Two pliers is essential. You don't want to have your hands anywhere near that plastic. Once that plastic starts melting or you melt it accidentally too much, you get that on your finger, it's gonna burn you. So you don't want to have anything. So if you screw up and you kind of melt it a little more, it goes on the pliers, not on your fingers, all right? Important safety tip. Some kind of larger scissor or shear. I've been using these more and more. And of course, X-Acto knife. And there are many, many other things, drill bits and things that as you go along, you start to experiment with, and they're very useful. And I'm going to show the uses for those tools, like these bits, to actually do a little bit of sculpting on your plastic so you can get shapes that you need, that you want for your build. All right. So, all right, well, let's finish this up. Right, so let's build a little chair and a cockpit for this new chicken walker, who is also an Easter egg. right, so here's the little chair, and it's a nifty little chair. I will have to kind of polish this technique a little bit, but not bad. Now I used, I'll show how I uh, attach the chair. We're going, if I can find this little plastic bit, we're going to practice with this little plastic bit, and I'll show exactly what I did. Okay, so this is the base of the chair. So very carefully, made a hole. Okay, and I made the hole a little bit big, but I used hot glue and put a metal fastener in it. I've been realizing just how useful these metal fasteners are. And I leave it a little bit above ground and just, make sure it's straight. And then I put a little hot glue on the other side once I've opened up those little halves. And a little hot glue, and then I put my chair on top. So this way it's a little elevated from the platform, okay? So that's that. And then we got to come up with a little pilot for it. Okay, so the chair is done, and I had to go back with a little filing paper, and just do by hand just a little bit. But you guys saw the little bit that I was using on my Dremel to kind of file things, and I have very, very fine little bits. It's a great investment. They're like $7. I bought them a few years ago. Now they're probably more expensive, but these little bits, you can get them at Walmart even, and they help a lot to get into those fine areas because the Dremel is a lot quicker. You can actually cut with those bits as well if you're careful, okay? But it does tend to ruin the bit a little bit when you do that. But I have done it to kind of shape things a little bit more, and it's it's a nifty little chair. Yeah, I know it's a little cheesy. I know, guys, but this actually comes from. This is gonna be like a little pilot marker, and I have to paint it. And again, it's very cheesy. It uses plastic forks and the plastic within plastic forks, and then I use the soldering machine to give it more shape. And I'm gonna give it a little more of a chest. I already did the arms and a little bit of like the shoulder pads there, and that's all with hot glue. And I'm going to have a video very soon of how I make these very low budget figures, basically sculpting with hot glue, and probably now with this plastic. So this way, real low budget figures, just to, if you're on a pinch and want to test out some rules while you get some real figures, these are cool little things. So let me just give this a coat of spray paint. This has to be painted, and then he's going to be put in the chair. All right, so the pilot's in there with a little bit of black paint. At least there's some kind of figure in there, and I'm going to paint everything. This is not glued yet, but I could definitely get my brush in there, so I could probably I could glue all that, because I can definitely get my brush in there. Okay, then we're going to move on to another walker. I will show how I make these legs. It's not that difficult, okay? So I'll just show you that real quick, and we're going to move on to the light spider walkers. Okay, so to make these legs, I'm using dowels. Those craft sticks, or lollipop sticks. I mean, whatever you want to call them. And basically here we have 1.5 inches in length. We have about 2 inches here, a little over 2 inches, and then 1.25 inches about here. Okay, so that's just relative, like leg sizes. Now here I'm just, because this is just a demonstration, I'm using slightly different measurements. But basically what I do is I cut my craft sticks, then I take my Dremel and make round edges on all the sides that are going to be connecting, right? So you have a little bit of roundness on those sides, and that's it, okay? So now what I do is then I have my little paper fasteners. These are becoming so useful. And so I have them right here, and we're going to need 3 of those and 3 major leg parts. So this is for the leg of a chicken walker. Yes, the chicken walkers. All right. So next thing I do is I take my Dremel and I have to change the head on it, so I'll be right back. Okay, so first things first, here's the one with the little pilot that I made, okay, and I got to paint him up and all that good stuff. And then he's looking pretty good. He's got big spiky chicken claws. I might cut that a little bit. I don't know yet, but he stands very well, so I don't want to ruin it, you know. So yeah, here's the chicken walker that we just worked on, and I have to finish him. Okay, and there's some detail that he has, the little rivets. We're going to be finishing him and adding a couple of things here and there. All right, so he's done. Now, here's the spider walker, and here's a mantic figure that I have just for like scale comparison. So these are big walkers. Sorry, I said they would be light walkers. They're more like medium walkers, all right? So here we go. All right, so for my spider mech, here is the body, and you can see all of the little bolts right there that I added, and this is going to give it a lot of interest. Now I'm going to need another of these cogwheels. I really like it. And here we have a few masts, and there's going to be a little rope attaching, a little twine attached from the smokestack to there. More bolts, okay. And this is an old printer cartridge. Also has a pair of very small machine guns. All right, so this fella is pretty much ready. I'm not going to add too much more, maybe a few more rivets, okay? Now for the weapons, they're a little plain, and so what I'm going to do is add this piece. And this piece is an old cable tie, and I had to put it in the forge. It's a very persistent plastic. Had to put it in my forge candle, heat it up well, and shape it with my pliers to get it to fit. Now it's a nice fit. I'm just going to glue it and then cut off the little excess. And that's going to give it a nice little detail. See how I love that little detail there. That's going to be nice when we paint it, all right? So that's that. And then this walker also needs some bits here on the body, and so I'm going to continue with the rivets, and that's going to give it a lot of interest. And of course this is magnetized, and it's pretty cool. I kind of like this one actually. So to give a little more realism to the gun, there's no way here that shells could actually pass through this thin arm here, and I don't want to thicken it. I want it to be thin. So subscribers send me a bunch of different these tubes and all kinds of scrap building material in a box last year. And so I cut these tubes. This is very soft plastic, and I'm going to glue this together. And this is going to be an ammo box. So at least there is some sense that there's ammunition in here, and once it's gone, but at least there's some sense that there is something here to load the gun, all right? And they probably have clockwork mechanisms to get those shells inside. All right, so for my gun, I added a couple of bolts, and these are needles that went right through. They were heated in my forge. They go right through, not only secure the box, it is glued, by the way, with construction, with that cement, but it secures the box and the barrel. And then a little bit of detail there, okay? So it gives it more substance and really gives it the idea that, yeah, there's some shells in there and somehow they're communicating with that barrel, all right? At least it's there. All right, well, with the power of the forges, the spider walker is done. And so here are some of the details. Let's pull off his torso. And here we have a cylindrical drum that is the ammo feed for this gun. Okay, and it was a plastic container that I cut. And it has these cool like bars running through it. Cut it, use the lid, and then I just used some bits, a little wooden piece here because there was like a little latch there. So I connected that wooden piece so that it looks consistent. And then the fastener because that drum does spin. I also added these nifty little headlights that make it look like a bug. Okay, so there it is. That's the torso. Now, on the leg setup, I added all of its little rivets. And these are all in place now. More fasteners, okay, which could be details or lighting. I mean, whatever the case is. Then these nice cross beams. With my soldering iron, I go through very carefully, make little holes, attach all of the toothpicks, and then there's the little wire bit from those clothespins, and that gets attached to the base of the leg. So I have, it's all gluing now, okay? And so that piece is finished, and we just have to wait for everything to dry. And there it goes. A cool steam-powered spider mech. All right, so that's the end of that one. All right, now this walker needs a few things. There's got to be some cabling back there. We have to do the weapon arms and do a little something here. The periscope. This is the periscope head with the crystal that allows the pilot, who's going to be in here, to magnify things and see things. It's a bit of a magic thing, I guess. And now the legs have a piece of armor there. That's what we're going to call it. And this leg has been done. A lot of the ugliness has been covered. And now I'm working on this leg. Now, if you notice, the legs have all these little fasteners. And that allows me to put stuff on it nice and even. Notice the shape of the armor. I do a concavity right here. Hopefully that's the correct term. Well, I round it out because we are going to put something there. A little cover there. Okay. And basically this is looking good. Also, made sure that these pieces are bolted. There's a piece of heated wire that goes right through, cut, trimmed, and then I took my Dremel and made a little flat head on it by slowly going over it, and it'll spark a bit. So now that I said that about heating things, let's go over some safety procedures. Why don't we go to the MJ Forge and just go over a few safety procedures before continuing. The piece on the leg, you know, it really widens the leg, and that's okay. It's not too bad. I'm not going to add anything else. This is wide enough, and it's very, again, very, very strong. Now, for the side piece, I got to carve that up, and I'm going to wait till that's glued, and then just go to the forge, heat up my tool, and then carve some details, and that'll make it seem like it belongs. Also notice the concavity and how the shapes are similar, not identical, but similar, and that helps. Pretty much supposed to be together, you know, that kind of deal. All right, this guy should be drying, and we got to work on some weapons here. So I'm going to let the legs dry a little bit, and One note is that my fantasy world, I always work with some kind of fantasy world in mind when I'm doing these builds. I have very specific ideas and tastes, and of course, all that is very subjective. You're the boss when it comes to your scratch builds. How they look is really up to you, and what you like is really up to you. So, in this fantasy world, it's going to be technology in transition. Some of the races are developing coil technology, which is basically Tesla, but I don't want to call it Tesla, so I call it coil. And some mechs are going to start to show up with Tesla. And then we're going to transition into a sort of diesel punk world later on. Okay, but for now, it's still steam, and some races, like elves, have figured out ways to make very nice, smooth, egg like shapes for their walkers. And it is their idea that these shapes help their walkers somehow evade shells because the shells bounce off. Well, I don't know about that, elves, but it is their belief. All right. So that is my justification for using Mr. Egg Walker here. Soldering tool has become a very important part of my building process. And one of the cool things about this is that I can use this as a power cutter against certain plastics. Now, remember, again, you don't want to inhale the fumes. So I go right to my door here. I have two doors in the studio, so I have a nice breeze coming through. And I put my fan, simply mute the video if I'm showing something, and let that fan take those fumes out, okay? I even wear a mask. I'm starting to wear a mask. All right, so I want to show the process of making a shield. And also I have this pepper gun that I just made, okay? And it's made from various materials. And this pepper gun goes right here, attached to the arm. And I have to wait till things glue. And this pepper gun, there's actually enough resistance there that, and I'm going to cap it here so it doesn't come off. But this pepper gun has movement, okay? And then he has a shield that is completely movable, and the arm is movable, okay? So you can kind of adjust it. And it has a little bit of slack. I'm going to fix that, and that has to do with the base of the arm. I'm going to fix that in just a minute. But basically, this guy has a nifty shield, and, you know, that motion is just cool to have. It's not really necessary in our games, but it is cool to have. All right, so for the shield, I'm going to tell you what my thinking is. First of all, notice this is a piece from an old video cassette player, and I found these two pieces, so I used them right away. They're perfect for arms. I mean, they move, right? And I just had to figure out the movement. Notice how one arm pulls the other. That's because they're connected to the same dowel. But basically, here it has a hole, and here it has a hole. So I always examine my piece before I attach it and think about, oh, how could I use that little hole, those little holes, to maybe supply some motion or some accessories. So it's always good to look at your piece closely and make sure that you know, if there's any little holes, well, you might be able to take advantage of that. That's, to me, a lot of the secret of scratch building, okay? I also added a hatch to the front chest here, okay? And I got to add a little handle there. But that's a hatch that this walker has, and the pilot sees through this weird head thing that's more like a giant periscope, okay? That's my rationale. All right, so here's the pepper gun. Let's do the shield first, since that is easier. So for my shield, what I do is I take a piece of plastic. I cut it with my heavy scissors. These are scissors that I leave specifically for this roll, and I sharpen them occasionally, but you don't want to use these. You don't want to use good scissors, basically, is what I'm saying. Cut them. Take my Dremel with my filing bit and shape it. Give it a little bit of a file, okay? If I want a concavity here, take it and gently file so there's like a nice concavity there if I wanted to. I'm going to make a straight edge. Next, I take my soldering tool, and this is where we have to be careful because of the heat. And I'm going to, and also you want to have ventilation. So I'm going to turn on the fan. So I'm going to mute this a little bit so you don't hear the fan. Okay, so what I just did is that it opened the viewport for my shield, and then I come back with my file and straighten it up once the plastic has, melted. And you see the nice little rim there. You can even take hot pin or a little hot nail and with another plier, puncture it and make some holes like I did with this one. Now, to make some really cheap illusion of rivets without driving yourself nuts, take the same thing, put on the fan, get some ventilation going. And then I continue doing it all the way down around the shield. You can do it as much as you want. And when I paint this thing in the middle, I add a little bit of black paint, tiny bit of black paint after I've, or even with a wash, an ink wash, and then it'll give the illusion of like rivets, okay? Very simple. You don't have to kill yourself. Sometimes I like using this better because this gives me more, larger, better rivets, like heavier duty rivets. But this technique is actually a lot easier. Okay. And it's good for creating interesting textures too and patterns. Okay. So that's my shield. Now for my pepper gun, I took little dowels. If I can find it, here it is. Little dowels, and cut up 4 pieces because I only wanted 4 barrels. Then this piece here that you see that's kind of going around is a cable tie. Okay, and there, I'm trying to get it so that you can see that it's a cable tie, but it's a cable tie. I take the cable tie to the forge with my pliers and I apply heat to bend it, to take away the memory of the plastic. Then I use a fastener. Fasteners are becoming more and more important in my builds. I take the fastener and fasten it all the way around the 4 dowels and then glue on the other end. For the body, I use 2 miniature clothespins. And this is the size. They're very small. Well, not very small. They're a little over an inch. And I basically take 2 of those and then I trim one. And using a little bit of that construction cement and in addition to that, a little bit of hot glue, I put these together. Now, this piece here is just the remnant of a clothespin. That really doesn't play any role there. I just kind of liked it there. So this is glued on. I have to wait till it glues on. But very important is this piece. Now, this is a 16 gauge wire. All right, so you want 16 gauge is a little thicker, okay? And I get that at Walmart in rolls. I use it in my sculpting. 16 gauge, I take a drill, a very small drill bit, and very small drill bit from my hobby bits, and I drill a little extra hole in there so I can get my wire through. Now, what happens is there's a little piece of dowel here that I cut. And this is a slightly thicker dowel, a little bit thicker than barbecue skewers. And basically put my wire through there, bend it with my pliers, and secure that little dowel. Then it gets glued, okay? And the idea is that that little dowel goes right through my hole, the hole that was already there, and I put pressure on it, okay? And then I'm going to cap both ends with fasteners. Make sure everything dries, and then I have something with a little bit of motion. I mean, look at that motion, okay? There you go. So, and then there's a little motion here as well, okay? So I have to make sure this is tightened up and then cap it. And I may have to file that wood a little bit, get it closer to the hole, all right? And I use pliers to force it in a little bit. Okay, and it's the motion of this wire that provides the motion for the gun. And the little dowel is, notice how I use hot glue to provide my cap there, let that dry, and then that becomes a cap. I add a little bit of that construction cement on the other side, that secures the dowel. And then here I file this up, I'll bring it closer and then cap it again. Okay, and that secures my little gun there, and gives it some motion, you know, gives it a little bit of motion, and that's kind of cool. I've been making walkers for a while, mostly using like paper models and things like that. Paper models that I create myself using Microsoft Paint, not software. One of the things, if you haven't really done these kinds of scratch builds, you want to consider, first of all, whether you want a quadruped, whether you want a tripod walker, or whether you want a bipedal walker. In my experience, quadrupeds, while they take a little longer, they are the easier ones to build in terms of balance, because you have to think very carefully about your balance, your center of gravity. All of that stuff comes with experience and you futzing around with the legs and making sure that, you know, the pose that you're giving it is going to give it the proper balance. Now, one of these things about the Leviathans is that you want to consider size, the size of your model, because a Leviathan is going to have a hard time taking cover. So I have to think about my terrain. Terrain such as this building can provide some cover for this Leviathan, right? It can even go into the building a little bit. Now, depending on the angle that your opponent's coming from, not all of the Leviathan is going to be in cover. So if he's facing this way, then yes, the building's going to hide him. So you want to think about your terrain. The size of your table is going to indicate whether you're going to build a large model, right? If you're a gamer that doesn't have a large table, you might want to consider small scales, 15 millimeter stuff. We're going to talk about all that in the future. With Steam vehicles, I already have a whole collection of 15 millimeter scale scratch-built walkers for a World War II setting. You can see those videos in my channel on the playlist. Okay, so you may want to consider smaller stuff if you don't have the space or room for these big 28 millimeter stuff. So this is a Leviathan. This is for special games. But then with these critters, these are much smaller, and you can handle, you know, more. You can still handle reasonable tables, but they don't have to be too big. All right. So basically, my point is, you want to think about how that walker is going to stand on the tabletop. And remember, tabletops are going to be, if you're like me, I love adding a lot of terrain to my tabletops. So you're going to have hills, you're going to have forests, you're going to have broken buildings. How will your walker react to these kinds of different terrain, and how much benefit will they get from this terrain? Think about that when you're building your walker. And a lot of this is going to be experimental, because now I'm going to test it on the tabletop with a game and see how the walker works, you know, with the rules and with the terrain. All right, well, that was it for today's build. These were 3 medium walkers, and at the same time, I was also working on a tank, a smaller tank, and we'll see that in another video. I am officially ending the project. This was last week's 3 walker builds. Okay, so I did a total of 7 vehicles. So it was a marathon. I do have one more vehicle planned, which is a walking lorry. But that's going to be off camera, and I'll just show the vehicle when it's finished. Okay, I have some scenarios in mind where those kinds of like Army engineering vehicles would be important, support vehicles. All right, always keep your safety procedures in mind. If you don't like a technique or you don't feel comfortable with a technique that you see, don't do it. Try something else. All right. For me, this is working phenomenally. Okay, so, uh, but that's it. I wanted to show you guys a little bit of the building that went on with the walkers. And this isn't a step-by-step thing. It's really working more on the critical aspects of the walker, like the legs, very important, and they're usually the trickiest to build. Okay, and in the future we'll talk about small scale steam walkers and stuff, and we still have a lot of builds coming. All right, folks, thank you very much, and we'll talk very soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider checking our Patreon, and have yourself a great day, and most important of all, be safe. Talk very soon, talk in the next video, and hopefully get some games in soon.